It's another week. It's another Force with Friends, but this week we have the Bad Batch premiere to talk about. So, everyone's seen the Bad Batch at this point. If you haven't, spoiler warning, we're going to talk about the Bad Batch. Odds are you've probably already seen like a bunch of episode reactions, breakdowns, all the above. So, we're going to try to maybe steer in a different direction. We're going to talk about what we liked about these episodes, but we're also going to try to pick up on really three big themes of what we get from these three episodes. We're not gonna like go line by line or react to stuff. We're gonna talk about what we liked and where we think this is going moving forward. So, Kevin, what did you think about these three episodes, the start to this season?
It was a really good start. I thought the way they paced out the first three episodes was really good.
Yeah.
I like that you don't jump around within each episode, right? Like episode 1 is Crosshair and Omega. Episode
Yeah.
2 is Record Hunter. And then we go back. I appreciate that they didn't try to jump around within the episodes, because it allows you to focus on really moving along where these characters are at and what's going on. So I think that was a really good idea, the way they opened it up with these three episodes primarily focused on Omega and Crosshair, but also kind of catching up with Hunter and Wrecker. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really interesting. I thought there was some really cool stuff going on plot wise. I was a big fan of the premiere. I thought it resolved some things quicker than I thought it would. And I think it's really set up to do some really big and really pretty neat things in this season. So
yeah, I was pretty shocked at how much I enjoyed the episodes. 1 and 3, we kind of talked about this, but those were my favorites. I think if you ask most people, that's probably what, those were really good. And I kind of told you it would have been, they could have almost made the premiere like 1 hour long episode of just those two combined into one, because they really are a continuation. Like 3 is the follow up to 1. So I love that story that they're telling there, which we'll hit a lot on that later. But I did not like episode 2. I thought it was the weakest of the 3 episodes, but it was still fun. Like it wasn't a filler episode where they're going and doing something for Sid. That's been everybody's complaint for everyone's really only complaint for the Bad Batch is like, oh, they go and waste time on Sid episodes. And those are very annoying. Well, if this is our waste time episodes, sign me up. This may be the best season of animated Star Wars since Rebels. I mean, it's going to be pretty good if they go this route.
I don't think it was. I think it was necessary, because I think if this premiere had just been Omega and Crosshair, I think people would have been left like, well, what's going on with
the
other group, right? So so it needed to be done. It didn't do anything really major for this overarching narrative right now, except confirm what we already knew. They're looking for him. But it was still a good episode. I like seeing Hunter basically do a 180, right? From this lay low, we got to stay hidden. And now he's like, he doesn't care who he makes mad, right? Like they're going after the Pikes. They're involved with this Deveronian syndicate. It really highlights how important this is to them, that they've completely changed up their mindset. So I thought that was cool. It was a good episode, but like you said, it was not as engaging the way the first and the third episode were, in terms of new stuff that was going on and trying to figure it out.
Yeah, no, I agree. But also, I mean, obviously, episode 1 from the first season of The Bad Batch, that is a killer start to a season.
Yeah.
Season 2, it just doesn't like have the hook when you start off. I don't think, like, it's fine, but it's not like drawing you in that hour and 20-minute episode from the first one. It also like is nowhere near the start of this season. Like this sucked me in the same way the first season did. So I think they did an excellent job kicking us off. So what we're going to do over the next 20-ish minutes or so from now is we're going to break through 3 big topics that we're going to we kind of think was the big things here. So we're going to pick up with what's going on Tantus with Crosshair and Omega, kind of what's going on there. We're going to jump over to what's going on with Rex or not with Rex, with Wrecker and Hunter, and we'll kind of touch on Rex and Echo as well. Maybe just some speculation there.
They get mentioned.
They do get mentioned, and it kind of makes you think about like, oh, I wonder what they're doing, right? Like it's good that they mentioned them. And then also going to look at the big picture of where this is all going. So that's really going to be like our Palpatine Omega talk, I believe. We'll touch on it a little bit to start off with. Also, if our internet isn't great at any point in this, like while you're watching it, I have AT&T internet, and if you haven't heard, Thursday was not a good day for AT&T. So that could be if we're lagging any, that's my fault there. But let's start off with the confinement. So this really does take an approach of picking us up right where season 2 ends. Okay, where do we find these characters? Well, we find Omega kind of back to what she was doing when she was on Kamino. Because on Kamino, she very much was in confinement one way or the other. Like, even if you don't want to call it that, she wasn't going anywhere else. She was there, and she was helping do all these test things on Kamino. Well, where do we find her here? She's kind of locked up doing the test things here. She's even got Nala Say there is in captivity as well. But they're using what she's already done, what she's good at. They're just kind of making her do it for the Empire at this point.
Yeah. It really is kind of a lot like where she starts. And I think there's probably a temptation there to get comfortable, right? Like this is a life she knew. She even kind of has she seems like she has some sort of kinship with Emery. Like she acknowledges that like, oh, we're kind of like the same. And so I like that they play this thing. Yeah. So I do like that they play this thing as kind of like you could see her getting back into a routine of just being comfortable here and kind of just letting go of the fact that she did want to escape. And so I like that they brought it back. It's not really like prison, right? It really is a lot like where she started out, very comfortable, very familiar, very easy in a lot of ways, but very boring now compared to where she has been. And so it's definitely a change of pace, which I think annoys her. Yeah.
I like too is they let you know, like, okay, she's kind of doing what she's doing, but she's not happy about it. I mean, even if she's a good worker going along with all of it, she's keeping track on her on the wall, like how many days she's been there, and like she's been there a really long time. Like there's a lot of tally marks as you see on her wall there. And it really lets you know that, okay, she is doing this, but she fully expects to be broken out or to break out on her own at some point. And she's just like, they're turning her into the picture to me of what Star Wars is. So she's confronted with this evil empire, and it's trying to make her what it wants her to be, and she's having none of it. Like that is so Luke Skywalker there. That is Ezra Bridger. That is, all these rebellious characters that we have in Star Wars. That's what she is right now. So it's cool to see that she's actively going against the Empire at like she's probably 10 or 12 or something like that. I mean, she's not old at all. So it's pretty cool to see that, I think.
Yeah. I wanted to go back and see if there was a shot of any final tally of how many days she marked on that wall, because we obviously get a time lapse because her hair gets pretty long.
Yeah. That's true. She does have long hair.
I was wondering about exactly how long she's there.
I don't know.
Well, and because Hunter and Wrecker make the comment later, they're like, she's waited long enough, which makes it seem like it's maybe been a while.
Yeah, they do say that.
So I thought that was interesting. I love the fact that she recreates that, what is it, Lula, that doll?
Yeah, I like that.
Because, I mean, it's just like Emery doesn't understand what it is, right? She thinks it's just a kid with a doll, and she ultimately gives it back to her. But for her, this is a reminder of where I'm trying to get back to. And so I love that she not only made it, but literally carries it around with her everywhere. She hides it in that little box. And this reminder of who her family is, who her brothers are, literally goes everywhere with her. So I thought it was really cool that they added that little touch in there. It wasn't really a big part of anything in the story, but and we see it pop up again later with Hunter and Wrecker.
That's what I was about to say.
Yeah, and we're jumping ahead a little bit, but like the first episode and the second episode really kind of close the same way. It's her with her doll, and then there's a sequence of closing out the second episode on the doll on the Marauder.
Yeah.
Which again, it just connects them, right? Like that Hunter Wrecker episode could have been disconnected, but they show that doll enough to remind you of kind of what they're going after and where their thoughts consistently are, and the same thing with Omega. So I like the fact that they're separate, but they use just that imagery to really tie the two groups together still. I thought that was a good decision. I thought that was really well done.
I agree. And these animated shows, I don't know what it is, if it's just like Dave and his group, that's because, Dave is not the head guy on these. It's those two.
He created it, but
people.
It's
for this
like
season.
Rachel something.
Yeah. But just seeing from that Filoni line of
their name.
Yeah. That Filoni line of kind of storytelling, you see it in Clone Wars, you see it in Rebels, you see it here. There's always something bigger going on, and they weave these stories in so well, and they connect them in so many different ways. And I mean, obviously it happens in the movies, like George kind of did it as well. But I almost think that Dave and his crew in the animated series almost perfect it, like just drawing you in to these real deep moments. And it's on an animated show. It's not even like it's a movie or whatever, but they find a way to do that. And it's in every animated Star Wars thing that they do this as well. Like the closing to the Clone Wars, my goodness, that's rough to watch it. And so they're going to do that here too.
And I think, I could be wrong, but I think this is really the animated show where he does the least of the writing, because I know he created the show, but it's Jennifer Corbett. It was not Rachel. I was totally wrong. And Brad Rao. Yeah, those are the guys. I mean, they really drive all the pretty much. I mean, I'm sure Dave comes by and is like, "Where are we going? What are we doing?" But they're the ones really in charge of the story decisions and stuff. So, man, you got to give them credit, because I don't know, just walking into Star Wars in general and doing a good job and engaging people, that's daunting. So.
For sure.
Yeah, but it has been good. The opening was really well written and really well paced out, I thought. So
last thing on the confinement part, I just love this very sad thing of Omega domesticating these hounds. I mean, I'm a dog person anyway, so like I'm gonna find a connection when it comes to that. But I just thought that was a great way for her to pass her time and still kind of like humanize her to an extent. Like, she's doing all this stuff, but she's still a caring character as well. And when they were gonna like terminate the dog, and then I was just like, oh, they're not gonna do this to this dog. This is a character I've seen for all of about 45 seconds, and I'm just so invested. And then like she lets the dog go, and and so I knew as soon as she let the dog go, eventually they'll tie that dog back in. I just didn't know how quick it would be, but I thought that was kind of great, pulling at the heartstrings of animal people as well. That was pretty cool for Betcha. Betcha as the dog.
And so I did like that, because it also juxtaposes her with Emery, right? Like, who they should be. I mean, obviously they're not exactly identical clones, but just how different the two of them are in terms of Emery being just like focused on the job, cold, calculating, dismisses other things. Whereas that's definitely not Omega. And a lot of it has to do with where she's been and what she's done and this family she's kind of created. So it is a really cool look at her human side and how she's different from a lot of the people around her. Even the other clones to an extent, right? Like, who have been trained to be very, very cold, very rigid, very focused on a goal. It is interesting to see that.
So on the opposite side of Omega's confinement, we won't spend a ton of time here, but we have Crosshair. He is obviously confined. We last saw him in maybe a couple episodes before the finale. Might have been even more close to the end than that. But he is pushed to the brink on the Empire and the clone situation, and he shoots that Imperial general dead, on the spot on that snowy planet. And now he's confined. And so that's kind of Crosshair's spot of coming back to the good side. But when Omega's trying to get him back in, he's like, leave me alone.
Yeah.
I'm not into this. I'm over this. You should leave. And he even tells her, like, I wouldn't think twice about leaving you. So you need to
Yeah.
think the same way. But eventually she gets him right back into it. Which we'll talk about that kind of later, but it's good to see him to the point to where even if he's still Crosshair, kind of abrasive, very abrasive, he's not the personable one of the Bad Batch, but he still has a spot for Omega as well, and he's ready to get back to the Bad Batch, and so it's going to be cool for the band to be back together.
Yeah, that was last week. That was like one of the things I wanted to happen early was everybody back together I'm excited for that because now I feel like they have time that they don't have to like rush him being integrated back into this group. And so, because I think there's a really cool story there and there's some really good character interactions in terms of how is he going to come back with this group and what is everybody's response going to be. I don't want that to be an episode and it's fixed type of thing. So,
right.
And I like with the escape, he's still, I mean, he goes because he feels like he has to, right? He's still not really committed to this. Yeah, you're right. Let's escape. Let's do it type idea. He's still got a lot of reserve and guilt. And so I like where they have him right now. They didn't just fix him immediately and he's back up to speed. I like that he's still not quite himself. And we'll get to see him figure that out, I think. So,
no, I agree. So, kind of moving into where we find Hunter and Wrecker, and then we'll kind of touch on Echo and Rex as well. I don't think this is going to be a long talk here because their episode, it wasn't filler, but at the same time, it didn't move the needle a whole lot either. It was a fun episode, but story wise, we know they're out trying to find Omega. So they're working with that crime syndicate and they're just trying to get leads. So they haven't given up in the amount of time. They're kind of vague, like you said, about how long it's been. But we know they're still looking for Omega. They end up on this planet. I don't remember what it was called, but if they even told us what it was called.
I don't know.
But they end up and they come across some clone regs there. And so we kind of see this idea that there are clones scattered around and it's kind of a fend for yourself type of situation because the Empire is discarding of all these clones. They don't really have a place for them anyway. So we get that picture. I think that's a big picture thing from this episode. But at the same time, I think the main purpose of this episode was just to kind of get some action in, catch you up on Hunter and Wrecker and Echo and Rex at this point. We know Echo and Rex are off doing something else to try to get leads. Yeah. And so that's really all you get from this is they're trying to find Omega.
Yeah. And to your point, I think you said it, like I think it does continue to show how dismissive and just how they really view the clones as just expendable, right? Like they just leave those kids just hanging out on the planet. Like we don't need you. You're good. You're just going to die here. Kind of mentality. That's where the Empire's at right now with the clones, because we aren't really seeing much of. Really, the only clones we're seeing right now are the ones that are at Tantus, as well as the Commandos.
Yes,
and so beyond them,
everywhere.
They are everywhere, right?
It's cool.
And so I like them. Man, I wish we could. I don't know how you would do this now retroactively. You'd have to go back some, but I wish we could have like a story arc of Commandos because those guys were cool.
Yeah.
I loved that Republic Commando game from back in the day. Yeah. It was so fun. But yeah, no, they're really cool. But other than them, we haven't really seen the clones yet, other than the ones that are in prison. So it's a good reminder of the Empire is just kind of done with them, right? They're disposing of them when they no longer have a need for them, and so that's where they find these kids who they ultimately take in, right? Because they're not going to abandon them. Right. So got extra crew now.
Aren't they going to drop them off though? Isn't that what they said? Like they're going to drop them off to safety?
Yeah, they are going to drop them off somewhere. So,
but
said something about an island.
Yeah,
I'm trying to remember what that was. I was going
to ask you. Do you think this is a little bit of a foreshadowing to the clone uprising that we're probably going to get? Like, okay, they're making a connection with this group of clones, and so I don't think anything's accidental when they're telling these stories. I feel like at some point we're going to have this group of clones fighting at the end with everybody else. These kids can fend for themselves, clearly. I mean, they were living in that jungle. So I almost feel as if, if they do drop them off, it's still going to be like, hey, we're going to need some backup. And so at some point they show back up to help.
That's possible. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, there's a very good chance they pop back up in the show if they disappear, if they drop them off. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised by that at all. I am curious as to where they're going to go with the clones, because I was thinking about it, like, because you can't just have them lose easily, right? Like, the clones are supposed to be better than regular soldiers, right? So I'm curious if there'll be an uprising or if it'll be just like a try to escape type of thing, try to get out as many as they can. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what direction they go with that. But it's definitely heading that way.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and this will probably kind of be teetering into the big picture, but just like a side point, and we can talk about this at the end as well. I guess I'll leave it off here and we'll pick it up at the end when we talk about where I think it's all going, because I've got an idea for how they're going to wrap all this up and kind of where they're moving. And I think we do learn a good bit about it, a good idea about it in these few episodes. So kind of moving to the end here. The big picture from this episode, you can probably throw out the second episode as far as the big picture, most likely. But Palpatine is looking at making clones that are force sensitive, that can handle being force sensitive.
Right.
So, and we know this because through literature from the Rise of Skywalker, because the literature had to clean that masterpiece up. But we know that he's making clones essentially of himself that he can put his essence into when he dies. But as we read through the episode 9 novel, through the comics, really, I think it's mainly the episode 9 novel, but the clones that he's making are not cutting it. Like they can't handle him, essentially. Yeah. So what we learn, and they're making these specimens on Tantus, which I'm assuming, do you think he saw a clone of himself, or do you think he saw Snoke when that thing opened? Or a Snoke, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Because we've seen,
I think
in The Mandalorian.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Like, he makes a bunch of Snoke-like figures.
Yeah.
Makes me think that may be it.
But the thing is, we also see the Snoke-type figures on Exegol. So at some point, he had to have made non-Snoke-type figures, right?
Well, yeah, so, that's him. That's his
maybe that is
Rey's dad. Yeah. Well, Rey's dad was supposed to be a Palpatine, essentially, but then apparently there's like this one Palpatine that looks like Palpatine that he transfers his essence into. So there could be some leeway. It could be one that looks like him. True. Like, what if we finally see it and it looks like a young Palpatine? That would be pretty cool to see as well.
Yeah. One of the things I do like, obviously a lot of this started out as damage control. Right.
Also, let's just say it's Project Necromancer. I should have said that earlier. Like that's the big picture. Is we've heard it in The Mandalorian, season 3. Maybe the greatest contribution to Star Wars that The Mandalorian season 3 does is we learn about Project Necromancer, and then here it is. Okay, it's tying together. So that's what we're talking about. If you weren't aware.
Yeah, but I do like that it's beginning to at least make sense, right? Like it's at the point now where it doesn't feel like we just got to cover this up. It feels like it's part of a story now. And so, that was always our hope with some of the things that we didn't like about the sequels, is that they'd fill in stuff and I feel like this does that. Like this creates some better things for the sequels.
It does.
So and they're doing a good job of it, I think. Because this whole time it was interesting. Like I was really engaged with what was going on and how this project was going to go. And now that they've connected it to Omega. So I do think they're doing a good job of tying this all together.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. And it's going to be, well, first of all, it's interesting anyways. Like, I don't like how they pulled off the clone Palpatine. I think it was kind of cheap for a Palpatine returning here, all that. But it's still interesting. Like, it's all very interesting because it's not like it's a foreign concept. I mean, Palpatine's whole idea was being immortal. So when J.J. Abrams picks that up in 9, it's not like he's just pulling it out of his rear. I mean, it's kind of how it came across, but that's within character for Palpatine. So it's not just like repulsive that he would do this. The delivery was a little repulsive, but the idea was not. So I think exploring that is good, and I don't think there's a better group of people to explore it than John, Dave, and all of the people who are kind of building up under that line of thinking. So I think we're going to get a heavy dose of that between this, between the Mandalorian, obviously. I do like that the Mandalorian is branching off into the Thrawn story, though. So I think we're going to see some branches go out, but the
Mm.
Bad Batch is going to play a big role
It
in Star
is.
Wars as a whole. And I don't
Yeah.
think 3 years ago when this happened, any of us would have been like, oh, yeah, the Bad Batch is going to be an essential plot to what
That's
happens in the
true.
next whatever. But it is.
Yeah.
That's super
That's a
cool.
good point. No, you're right. I definitely, at no point did I have the thought about the show that this is going to be a big
Yeah.
piece of the lore for the movies
Yeah.
going forward. I
And it's
loved it and it was
huge.
entertaining, but they've done a good job pulling it off, right? And so it is really cool to see. So and I think you texted this today, but I do think I hope that you're right that we'll see a lot more Palpatine.
Yeah.
Because his presence on screen is just always so fun. It's so good.
I will say, too, it blended in very well. I mean, because we talk
Yeah.
about this kind of frequently. Like, if you throw Vader or Luke or Anakin in, it's almost too much. But
Yeah.
Palpatine is kind of like a great I don't want to say it's like a side dish, that complements everything, but he kind of brings everything into the picture here. And
Hmm.
he is the big bad guy for all 9 films. So I mean,
Yeah.
it would almost be weird if he didn't have some presence. So I think having him looming almost kind of
Yeah.
puts a big target on where our main heroes, who are they ultimately fighting against? Well, it's not just Hemlock. I think that's his name. It's not Hemlock. It's not
Yeah.
just the Empire. It's Palpatine himself. So I think having him in it pretty frequently is not a bad thing because it
No.
really lets you know who the enemy is.
Well, and so far too, like with the Tantus stuff, like he fits so well within Tantus because Tantus
Mm-hmm.
is we're seeing the really sinister evil
Yeah.
side of the Empire here. Like it's a different feel from just the overpowering force of the Empire. This is like the really messed up, like I said, sinister side. And so to have him
Yeah.
move into this place where all this stuff is going on, it just feels natural. Like that's where he should be. So I like that they're giving us this view of the Empire that's a little bit different from just, you know, the ships and the soldiers and the overwhelming force that we see so often. I think they've done a really good job of showing that different side to what they're doing.
And I think we kind of talked about it earlier. You can maybe expand, but the fact that Palpatine knows that this is kind of his thing. This isn't the
Yeah.
Empire's thing at large. This is Palpatine's thing. So he's obviously going to throw all the weight of the Empire behind it because that's who he's ruling. But this is a very selfish ambition for him. This is not like a, hey,
Mm-hmm.
I'm building this great power. This is a contingency plan for me because, he's not doing so hot. He's a
Yeah.
few years removed from electrocuting himself. And, he's got about 20 years left before he's in trouble. So this is very much a Palpatine focused thing. And he says what did he say? That they would think it's an abomination, like other
Yeah.
people in the Empire.
Yeah. He says others within our ranks, which to
Yeah,
me makes
yeah,
it sound like people close, right? And I was telling you, like to me, it sounds like it's who does Palpatine? He's in control. Like he runs this thing. He does. Everybody does what he says. So who does he really need to keep secrets from? Um, and I just have to wonder if it's Vader, right? Like because this, to me, thinking back to like who the Sith are, right? Like they have this mantra that's about passion and strength and power and freedom through the Force, right? Like
yeah.
it's amassing this power and control over the Force so that you just simply dominate everything else. Vader like embodies that to a T, right? Like
Yeah, he
I thought
does.
back to Admiral Mati where he's like, you're hokey religion, all this stuff, and then Vader's like, no,
He
you're not
gets,
going to talk about the Force that
yeah,
way, right?
choked.
And so Vader has no respect for viewing science as higher than the Force. But that's kind of what Palpatine's doing, right? Like Palpatine's kind of abandoned seeking immortality through the Force, and he's just trying to grasp onto anything at this point. Like he's kind of desperate,
Yeah,
which I find is really interesting. He's kind of moved beyond these Sith ideals of the Force frees me to I'm going to cling to this, and I'm going to find any way to do it. If it means moving past the
yeah,
Force and just doing it through science or whatever this is.
he's
And
doing it.
so I don't know that Vader would view that as right because this is literally what he seduced Anakin over with was this, hey, we can defeat death with the Force. And then Palpatine's kind of abandoned that. So I found that comment really interesting. I find this whole setup with Palpatine really interesting, that he has gone so full in on this science side of things, rather than the Force side of things. And so it's interesting, and it has me really intrigued as to if we're going to get Vader, if Palpatine is trying to keep this from Vader. But yeah, just that line, like, there's people in our ranks that would not like this. I like that.
And also, this is so in character, like even in Legends for Palpatine. So for all the people, and at times I am this people, but like Disney hates Star Wars. They don't get the Legends, whatever. I don't know why they talk in a voice like that. But in Legends, what's it? Plagueis, if you read the book, he's into cloning. Like, that's his thing. It's almost as if cloning might be the way that he's going to do it. So this is not like a Disney idea or whatever. This is something where there's been stuff written kind of along these lines, and so why don't we kind of take those ideas and bring them into canon? So it works out. I really like how in galaxy this feels, in story that this feels. It's not like we're all going, I don't know about this. This is like a square peg in a round hole. This is just right up the story. I mean, it is perfect.
Yeah, and in the Legend stuff, I think Plagueis was like really one of the first Sith to kind of move away from, just this domination through the Force and begin like experimenting with stuff, right? Like seeking knowledge through science and other stuff.
Politics, business, science. Yeah. That's how they did it. So, all three.
Yeah, we definitely see Palpatine has kind of taken up that mantle of there's not really, I would say with Palpatine, there's not really any commitment to the Sith, but to his power. And so I think that differentiates him from previous Sith Lords. It's like the code and the ideas of the Sith. He doesn't seem to really be about those things. He just seems to be about one aspect of it, which is I'm going to stay in power by all means possible.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. He does seem to kind of begin drifting away and moving past the Sith, maybe I should say. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and if you read Plagueis, that's what he's about anyways, is making himself its own thing. Yeah. And Plagueis says that, like, because Plagueis is going to run the business side of things, essentially, because that's what was his species? Whatever he was. It's on the tip of my tongue. It's a short word. Either way.
It is. Starts with an M?
It does. He's...
Muns
or something like that.
Muns?
Yeah. Something along those lines. Put it in the comments. But either way, they were going to handle that, the business side, and Palpatine was going to be this political aspect, and they're about to just change the way things go.
Yeah.
And Palpatine's still doing that here. So again, I've said it a bunch, but I really like this, how they're treating this here.
Yeah. It is cool.
I will say, as far as the big picture goes, so we see Omega and Crosshair get out. And Betcha. Betcha comes back and saves them, and Betcha goes with them. So that was cool too. But obviously they're going to reunite. And Omega knows something is going on with her, because Nala Se tells her. She doesn't know the whole picture. Very confident Crosshair has no clue what's going on with all of that. So it's going to be interesting to see how that information gets reconciled to the good guys. I'm not sure how that's going to happen, but I'm assuming that is going to happen, because the ultimate goal is not necessarily going to be taking the Empire down, I don't think. I'm pretty sure it's going to be taking Omega away from them. So I think that's what we're going to see as the end game, because again, I do think all of the Bad Batch outside of Omega dies. I still think that's what's going to happen. I don't know if it's going to be Rex that gets her away, because we know he lives. They're hinting a lot at Asajj Ventress maybe being the one, so maybe Asajj takes her away and we get this Asajj Omega story. I think that would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
But regardless, I think where this story is moving is somehow on Tantus, all of these clones kind of get wind of, one, the Empire is going to get rid of them, and two, they all want Omega to do this sinister thing, whatever it is. And so I almost think every clone, for the most part, ends up gone at the end of this to protect her and keep Palpatine from this. Does it look like all of them destroying Tantus, like ending up back there, and that facility gets destroyed, and that kind of puts a hamper in Palpatine's plans, because the plans never ultimately come to fruition, right? They never
That's true.
get it exactly where he wants. And so I almost see that this big clone uprising, yes, they're going to lose, but that Star Wars hope that we always have, even when things are bad, is maybe they lose by destroying this. So they all end up going, but ultimately it slows the Empire down, and it makes it to where, okay, we've got to start this back over from ground one, from level one. And I think that's where this is going. I could be way wrong, but Palpatine, I don't think, is going to end up getting what he needs from Omega, because we already know it doesn't work out for him in the end.
That's true. Yeah, so we know that she gets away at some point somehow. I wouldn't be surprised if the clones, like the prisoner clones on Tantus, just get eliminated at this point, because they were there for the reason of trying to find it. Well, it's Omega, right? So they don't really need these guys anymore. So unless they have other experiments they're doing, I could see them just getting wiped out now. So I don't know. And I think with it's interesting, like the whole Nala Se thing, like it really points to Nala Se made Omega for this purpose, right? Because she knows throughout this whole process, she's getting rid of her samples, that she's going to test positive on this experiment they're doing, right?
Yeah.
The only way she would know that is if that's what she made Omega for, right? And so I love that this is going back to, really, she's been protecting her from this all along. And I wonder why. Like, was this a directive that, hey, I want you to make a clone that fits this bill, and she lied and said they weren't able to? Or, but it's clear at this point that had to be intentional, because Nala Se has known this for a while. Like, it's not like she's just finding out. So I find that interesting, and I'd love to know more about how that happened. Like, why she was charged with that. Did Palpatine ask him to do it? I mean, I'm assuming that's probably what happened, but
yeah, there is some backstory we need to that. And also, this is going to turn into like a chase for Omega, because Hemlock lets her go. So he's got the full resource, and he says that I've got the full resources of the Empire, which lets you know that it's about to be a pretty wild chase as well. They're going to throw everything at this, because he sees this as his step up the ladder. So it's going to be exciting to see him. Yeah.
Because he was talking to the Emperor, he's like, hey, when are you going to appoint me to the next position, right? Yeah. Emperor's like, just wait, due time. Yeah, so he's definitely trying to climb that ladder. I think you're right about our predictions. I think they're going to be hiring Cad Bane. I was really hoping the Cad Bane would kind of like join up with the Bad Batch for a term. That would be fun, but I think that'll probably end up happening. I think the Empire will probably hire him up now that this has happened so early.
I think they'll end up hiring.
It'll be interesting to see, though. There probably will be a lot of people after him, so that'll be interesting to see who we have in the mix coming after him. One other thing, I do like that Crosshair, like, he's not going to be able to shoot, right? Like, he's
hand.
I think there's a plot going forward where he's going to feel pretty useless. Like, he can't do his thing, like the thing he's supposed to do. He's not going to be able to do. So
he'll be able to make the shot.
That'll be interesting. Though. Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. So we'll see how he resolves that with the tremors and whatnot. But that'll definitely be a thing going forward.
This will be the last thing I say. I was just kind of thinking through this right now.
You're good.
But all right, so there's kind of a discrepancy going on. So we've got Project Necromancer, and we know about it with the Mandalorian. We know about it here, and we know there's that Imperial Shadow Council. They're kind of waiting for Thrawn, but at the same time, they need an update from Hux's dad about Project Necromancer, right? That's kind of what they say in that episode of Mando.
Shadow Council thing.
But at the same time, you've got Gideon, who's wanting these Force-sensitive clones.
That's true.
His is kind of an offshoot. So did he want Grogu just to get the blood, kind of like the way they need Omega to make these clones that can do this? So is that a Moff Gideon thing? Or is this a Project Necromancer like Palpatine thing, to where he wanted Grogu, and so the reason he needs them is because this whole Omega thing failed 20 years before it, or 30 years before it? Yeah. Like, are we going to see why they need him?
I think it may have been both. Like, to me, you could almost look at it like Gideon kind of comes in and co-ops this thing. It's like, well, I'm going to use this for my purposes, because
Yeah.
Palpatine's not his essence or whatever he transfers isn't going to include. Yeah. It's not going to include his midichlorians though, right? Like,
true.
So to me, he was like the donor, right? Like this is where we're going to get the midichlorians. Okay. So I could see that being the donor for Palpatine, but I also think Gideon I don't think he cared about Project Necromancer. So he very well may have stepped in. Yeah, he didn't. So he may very well have stepped in and just been like, I got my own project that I could use this for.
Yeah. Because to me, that's where season 3 kind of bugs me, not to get into a rant on that, but everything from this almost seems like it would fit just perfectly into the story they were telling until they're like, oh no, it was Gideon's, my clones, So that kind of doesn't fit. So I'm almost hoping that Gideon was kind of like, oh, Palpatine's doing this, I'm going to do this too, and just kind of piggyback off of it to where it all still does carry.
That would make most sense to me. Yeah.
But I love the fact, just kind of wrapping this up, I love the fact that it looks like this story is going to tie in with The Mandalorian and the sequel trilogy. I mean, it's masterful storytelling if that's what happens.
Yeah, and I mean, that and assuming we'll get an end to this clone arc, right? Like this will be 2 really big things that come out of this season is like what happens to the clones and then what's going on with this Project Necromancer thing. So one of those I was expecting. I was not expecting the other. So
I love the idea that Palpatine essentially makes the clones to bring the Republic down from within. And at the same time, the clones are going to be, I think, what is a domino for the Empire falling. It's going to be cool that he commissioned them for this one thing and they kind of get the last say on things, which I think is what's going to happen. So I think that's cool. Do you have any predictions for where we're going? Anything other than what we've already said?
I'm curious as to what. I mean, I think we see Rex and Echo soon because
probably the next
episode. Something. Yeah, there has to be something coming up that's going to drive the next part of the story. Because now I think I don't know if I speak for you, but I kind of thought that this Echo and Crosshair thing would not be as resolved as quickly as it was. I thought maybe that rescue would be like a mid-season thing. So. The fact that they're already out, the fact that they're out, which I love, I think it leaves a lot of space for other stuff. I think you have to have something come in now that's like, here's where the story. We know what Palpatine's doing, we know what Tantus is doing, we know they're after Omega, but what is this group going to do while they're on the run? I feel like that's got to come in the next episode. So I think we're going to see Rex 12, and Echo.
Yeah, 12 episodes to figure it out, of which 8 of which will be leading up to the final arc, which will probably be the last 4 episodes. So. And
again, they got a lot to cover. So I think we'll start seeing Rex and Echo. I think we'll see some of the other characters pretty quickly, like whether it's Fennec or Cad Bane. I don't think those things are going to be just like at the end. I think they're going to be throughout the show. So.
No, you're right. And ultimately, like everything that happened in this, everything that I think is going to happen is still on the table. It doesn't contradict any of it with the big clone uprising at the end, them kind of winning but not really winning. And then I do think we might see Palpatine at the end almost making this command like, I'm, moving things to either Exegol or Navarro or something like that, where we see kind of some of these cloning things. I can see that kind of be well, they've won this one, we have to move this elsewhere, and that kind of being the end of it. Yeah. So great. To sum it all up, great start. There's a lot to talk about. We talked like 10 minutes more than I thought we would, which is great.
And I know, but one thing that's crazy is we haven't said a thing about Asajj, right? Like that was the thing everybody was so hyped up about, but like we've had so much to talk about in these first 3 episodes that had nothing to do with that. Like, so that's still another thing coming in at some point that'll be a really big deal. So there's a lot,
it's going to be a good season. This is going to be a really good season. So looking ahead to next week, as far as the podcast goes, it doesn't make a lot of sense for us to wait until Thursday and try to film this and then have an episode out on Friday. Just the logistics don't work out. And honestly, for one episode of The Bad Batch, there's probably not enough time to dedicate a whole episode to it, because some of these episodes inevitably will not have much to it, I feel like.
That's true.
Just wouldn't make a lot of sense. The next episode, historically, looking at the Bad Batch premieres in the past, probably isn't going to have much to it, just from the way they've went.
Yeah.
So next week we are going to talk about each one of us our 3 projects for Star Wars that we would like to see in the future from Disney. So whether it be a Disney Plus series, a movie, they kind of cover a lot of ground with literature. So let's just say like maybe video games, movies, or TV shows, because they do tell stories through the video games.
Yeah, that's true.
Or maybe one of each.
That would be good.
Let's do this. Let's say you come up with
one
video game you want to see, one television series you want to see, and then we can even say like it can be a movie, like it could be a sequel or whatever. Like it could be a trilogy or a saga. That kind of gets us into
a movie
categories.
idea. Okay.
Yeah, so video game, TV, and movie idea.
Yeah, this will be interesting because you and I have not talked about this, so I have no idea.
We have not.
What you're going to throw out next week. This will be interesting.
Well, especially since I have to narrow it down to my top one from each category.
Right?
It'll be
It's going to be harder. Yeah, it will be.
So that's what we're doing next week. So be sure to join us Friday after to see what we want to see out of Star Wars in the future. Otherwise, thanks so much for watching. We really appreciate it, and we will see you guys next time.